Genius dude, who is now a Caltech prof, was bullied mercilessly by a bunch of jocks, and the leader was a spoiled kid with a Porsche 928. This was 1985. A rumor started that someone fucked with this guy's car, and as days went by, it was clear that it was so bad the car was totaled, but not a lot of folks knew what happened. I was pretty good friends with this kid. Rob was always nice to him, and his brain, both parents worked at NASA JPL, fascinated me. Turns out Rob had managed to break into the guy's car at night at his house with a Slim Jim and left something tucked under the driver's seat. It was a tightly sealed quart ball jar with a dead rat, 4 of hydrogen peroxide, and 3 of water. The chemical putrefied the dead rat into a horrific stank liquid, and it also intensified the aroma produced, as Rob said, by an order of magnitude. Rob said that anyone within 20 would puke uncontrollably, and the smell would persist years. I think I'm the only one who knows why. A few days later, the jar exploded all over the car, and the smell was so bad that they had to junk the car for parts. Pretty sure the kid got another Porsche from daddy, but the fact that Rob destroyed an entire Porsche and humiliated this dipshit for less than $5 is still legendary in my mind. I kept the secret until almost 20 years later. I was not involved, but when I was in 9th grade, our classmates were so rowdy and toxic that it caused the school to go on lockdown several times. One fight ended with one student pushing another student into the vending machine, broken glass everywhere. They took away the vending and drink machines from the hallways. We never got them back all through the 4 years. That year, they also brought in police and drug dogs. All the students had to stand against the walls as the dogs sniffed each person, and each person's locker was sniffed. My class was very sex crazy as well. One girl and guy were caught in the bathroom performing receiving oral. The girl transferred to another school. At least 3 of the teachers, all female, were flirting with students throughout the 4 years. One teacher kissed a student on the cheek in front of us in class. 2 of them prepositioned a friend of mine for sex, but he turned them down. An art student, Jill, dated a fellow art student, Jack, for a couple of months. Sometime after they split, one of their mutual friends borrowed Jack's laptop for a project and found a hidden camera sex tape of Jack and Jill. The friend told Jill, who immediately took legal action against Jack. During the proceedings, it emerged that Jack had used the video footage as a reference to create a life-size nude torso bust of Jill, which he had recently submitted for a class project without her knowledge or permission, of course. The next day, Jack returned to class, and the art teacher, having been informed of the discoveries by Jill, proceeded to fucking ream him out. This devout Baptist teacher called him every variant of voyeuristic fuck you could possibly imagine, and basically renounced him as a student. Jack, who loved this teacher like a mother, was so upset and ashamed that he left school and refused to return. This in turn created some primetime family drama for Jack, as his still living grandparents had bequeathed him an inheritance of hundreds of thousands of dollars on the sole condition that he had to graduate from that specific high school private Baptist school. A girl tried to burn down the theater. I'm in my tech theater class and we're having to clean the theater and reset everything day. I'm working on a light when I smell burning. One of the vacuums is pretty old, so I figured it was that when someone else smelled it and said it wasn't coming from the vacuum. Then I noticed the smoke. I tracked it to one of the dressing rooms and saw how much smoke was coming out. I touched the door, wasn't hot, and gently touched the handle, slightly warm, but pretty close to room temp. I opened the door to find a stack of old costumes on fire and spreading. I yelled fire. Got chastised later for yelling that and not pulling a fire alarm. And everyone ran for it while the teacher grabbed a fire extinguisher. Later, when heads were counted, a few students couldn't be accounted for. One of them had an attack of conscience and said that it was this one girl. When confronted, she didn't even deny it. She admitted to it and said it was because she was angry at the teacher for having written her up for something I don't remember what. She was pretty open about how miserable she was in school and as a person. Scary thing was, directly over the dressing room was storage for the rest of the costumes. Had the fire gotten up there, that would have been it for the building. A few years later, a different theater teacher was found out to have been our Ping students by saying how he could make their scholarships go away small town with not many ways out. They investigated, but since he was so close to retirement, they basically just kicked him out of school. He's still walking around free. We had this teacher, if I had to guess, I'd put her in her mid to late 30s at the time, but I've never been good with ages. Anyway, she was very much a type, kind of like a grown-up punk rock aesthetic, tattoos, dyed dark reddish brown hair, dark makeup, basically as alternative as she could get away with while still complying with general standards of professionalism. Very snarky and sarcastic. She also had a flock of lesbians. My school, for whatever reason, had quite a few girls that were into girls, at least they were at the time. The majority of them ended up with guys in the long run. They were mostly all pretty alternative too, and they flocked around this teacher from the moment they started school. The older ones would bring the new ones in. It was frankly creepy. Many of these girls never even had her as a teacher. She would even invite them to her house, regularly, but there was no drama around her. Of course not. Women can't do sex crimes. No, the drama came when a guy a year under me danced with her at some school dance. She was very loose and friendly with basically all the students, though not to the extent she was with the lesbians, and her dancing with students was not an unheard of thing. But when this dude danced with her, he tried to pick her up. I wasn't there, so I don't know too many details, but basically he tried to pick her up. Like, as part of the dance, she did not want to be picked up, struggled, and he ended up dropping her. Miss Igruin teenage lesbians. Had the gall to press charges against this kid, either sexual assault or sexual harassment, I forget which. There was very clearly nothing sexual intended in what he did. The kid was a well-known harmless goofball and annoying one, but that didn't matter. He ended up being suspended for a while, and I graduated before the issue resolved, so I'm not sure what happened. I graduated in 09. 2 years ago, I learned that that teacher was finally fired for her inappropriate behavior, and that she's also now married to a girl that was a year under me. I do not know if those two are related. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure she waited several years after the student graduated before they got married. In junior high, the fire alarm went off on a Thursday. Whatever, you don't think much of it and just proceed half-assed like it's a drill. Then we get outside and the fire trucks show up. Turns out there was a fire. Wow. Okay, gets taken care of. We go back inside eventually. Next day, fire alarm again. We're walking outside. Speculation is maybe we were too slow yesterday, so now it is a drill. Fire trucks again. Goddamn, 2 fires in a row. Now something is really weird. Again, it gets taken care of, wasn't too big. We go back to class. BTU, there's a giant propane tank right outside the school for whatever reason. I remember seeing it from across the field thinking, boy, that's not in the best spot. All right, Monday rolls around and we're in first period. Screwing fire alarm. What the hell? My class was on the second floor midway down the hall. We get out to the muster point across the field. We're all standing there just waiting to get let back in. Boom, a window breaks in flames, starts shooting out the second floor at the end of the hall. Holy shit, now this is a legit fire. Our school was literally 100 m away from a fire department. It took them like 30 minutes to get there. They must have been out on a call or something, but it seemed to take forever. As with many buildings here locally, it was built of wood, so the place charred up pretty well. They put it out, but we all got sent home. I forget how many days off they gave us, but the engineers had to determine if the school was safe to be in. I don't recall there being any grief counseling available or anything, but who knows? I'm sure these days there would have been. This was 2001. Turns out a teacher set all the fires. She was a science teacher, so she had access to flammable liquids and such. Apparently she was bipolar or something and stopped taking her meds. Amazingly, no one got hurt. A kid in the grade above me got cancer, something not too serious, but went from a nobody to being very popular. Everyone knew him and was rooting for him. He was on the news, close with the police department, etc. His senior year here, he was 18. He was so popular with the freshman girls, if you know what I mean. I just have to add, this kid was not attractive in any means. He just really played up the cancer card. Pretty sure he was declared cancer-free around 16, but always kept his head freshly shaved bald. Anyways, turns out he was sexting a ton of freshmen, these 13 and 14-year-olds, which is terrible and disgusting in of itself. Compared to the other shit he did, this was nothing. So, the king himself is so proud, delusional, weird, that he has a group chat with a bunch of these girls all sending pics and videos back and forth. I don't know why or how they were comfortable all sending this stuff to him in a collective group chat. Maybe they felt safe together, ITK, completely besides the point. I don't know how this particular event happened, but one day he sends a video of himself to the chat and the girls pass it around to everyone at school. Somehow I ended up seeing this video. It's still out there. I could probably dig it up, but then I would have to scrub my eyeballs with bleach all over again. To give you a fair idea, picture the whitest and chubbiest kid you've ever seen, squatting down in front of the bathtub, full hard on. He's probably going to jack off for these little girls, right? Well, yes, but first he drops a log on the floor and pisses right on top of it. Then goes on his merry way, death griping his tiny thing. God, I have puke in my mouth just remembering it. Thankfully, it got spread around enough that the cops got word of it and shut most of it down, but ERC, he didn't do any jail time, just no access to electronics and can't be left alone with minors without supervision for a few years. Like I said, cancer card got him buddy-buddy with law enforcement. I haven't really heard anything about him since, but I'm sure he's still around town as ugly and disgusting as ever. I'm gonna go reread the news articles and see what I dig up. Oh, holy moly, so many things, but here's my favorite. Don't ask how exactly, but basically my HS had an elective that was independent radio. Think very local, online, and shortwave. We had a soundboard, etc. It was cool. I think something like up to 150,000 people could technically be reached. Anyways, there was a homecoming football game and we'd won. One of the players from our team called his girlfriend, who was not only doing a radio show at the moment, but had been covering the game as it happened. Long story short, she proceeded to tell him all sorts of very dirty and explicit things she wanted to do to him as a congratulations that night at her parents' house. Excruciating detail. Rule number 1 of radio is when you call in from your car, turn your own radio off for audio feedback purposes. Rule number 2 is when you're running the radio show, turn off your mic when you play music or on air and don't want to talk. The girl failed to do that and basically broadcast live her sexual proclivities. She was a senior, so she didn't leave school or anything, but for the rest of the year, she kept a very low profile. Needless to say, the recording of that show was removed from online, but the damage was done. Oh, holy moly, so many things, but here's my favorite. Don't ask how exactly, but basically my HS had an elective that was independent radio. Think very local online and shortwave. We had a soundboard set. It was cool. I think something like up to 150,000 people could technically be reached. Anyways, there was a homecoming football game and we'd won. One of the players from our team called his girlfriend, who was not only doing a radio show at the moment, but had been covering the game as it happened. Long story short, she proceeded to tell him all sorts of very dirty and explicit things she wanted to do to him as a congratulations that night at her parents' house. Excruciating detail. Rule number 1 of radio is when you call in from your car, turn your own radio off for audio feedback purposes. Rule number 2 is when you're running the radio show, turn off your mic when you play music or on air and don't want to talk. The girl failed to do that and basically broadcast live her sexual proclivities. She was a senior, so she didn't leave school or anything, but for the rest of the year, she kept a very low profile. Needless to say, the recording of that show was removed from online, but the damage was done. I have no way to confirm this, but the show American Vandal S1 about who drew the dicks was very closely related to something that happened at our school, which was the same area that the show took place in. One night back in 2004, when I was in high school, somebody had gotten onto the campus and roamed around the halls spray painting dicks of various sizes onto all of the surfaces. There was a 20-foot one on the gym. So it looks like it might have been multiple people. It wasn't a whole lot of security or cameras and stuff like that, especially back then in my school. When we got to school the next day, which I think was in the middle of the week because we have school the day prior, all of the surfaces were covered with tarps and cloths. So almost none of the students actually saw what happened. I'm honestly not sure why, but I was one of the first people called into the office to be asked about it. I think it was because I had used chalk to decorate my locker thinking that it wouldn't be an issue because it was easily wiped off and I just put a bunch of flames and hearts and stuff like that. They brought me in and I had no idea why because, as I mentioned, nobody had seen the dick, so no one was aware that there was anything going on. It kind of just looked like construction was happening. And they didn't come out right saying what happened. They just asked me what I was doing last night, what my friends were doing etc, and I was real nervous because I thought maybe somebody got hurt or a real serious matter was going down because I've never been taken and questioned at the principal's office. I was one of those real quiet, goody-goody kids. It turned out that all the students had been questioned, and for the real serious offenders, if they thought might really be associated with what happened, they actually had their parents and police there for it. Everybody else just got a casual questioning, so I felt better about that. Everything was covered up really quickly. Almost nobody knew about what happened. Everything was painted over. Nobody was really talking about it because nobody knew what happened, but we were all buzzing that week about being questioned and what was going on, and all kinds of rumors were floating around. We had a lot of other real serious drama in the past and pretty soon into the future from this point, but for some reason that was the biggest drama at our school. Even though a lot of people had no idea what had actually even happened, the rumors were insane, and once word actually did start to get out of what happened, all kinds of shitty kids were trying to take credit for drawing them just for clout. To this day, I don't think anybody knows who really drew them, and as far as most people know, nobody got specific blame or outed for doing it by the school. If anybody ever was caught, it was handled really quietly and privately. But that was the same year that there were warnings and codes of conduct put out for senior pranks. We've had a science teacher get caught with a sophomore. This was the year before lockdown in my state. She's doing well now. Studying to be a nurse, we had an 8th grade history teacher get arrested for domestic abuse. A 7th grade art teacher and her HS English teacher husband were arrested for trying to steal from a cum, and Go definitely just revealed my region of the US. The HS has 3 principals assigned to students by alphabet. One was arrested for a DUI last year. We had a kid and a group of his friends threatening to shoot up the school. There were kids being pulled out of class, pictures of firearms present in the parking lot, and warnings on social media of when they were going to do it. Our school lied to the media and concerned parents because they were upset by the attendance. Back in the day, we had a murder-suicide. A girl had rejected an ex-boyfriend and she was killed, and then he turned the weapon on himself. In front of a classroom during school hours, we had a girl send her boyfriend a video of her putting peanut butter on herself and letting her dog lick it. You can imagine where. She was barked at until she graduated. There was another girl that masturbated with a red Expo marker. People would slip Expo markers into her bag, but that's word of mouth. I had a friend that was suspended in 8th grade for selling prescription pills on school grounds. Before he left for his final day in suspension, he shit in the trash can. Your regular teen pregnancy stuff, blah, 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 blah. Half the football team is on steroids, and most of our swim team has allegations of sexual violence and harassment against them. Not in high school, but in middle school, 4 and 1. Get ready for this mega thread. The first one was a guy who had some beef with one of the bitchy girls. Not like the plastics from Mean Girls, but just an ugly asshole. So, and I don't know how, but he hacked into her school Google account and pasted, I think, anti-Semitism in a school group chat, might have been her Snapchat account. Don't remember the next one was 3 students who had created a Google chat room where they just spread answers and cheated on lessons and tests. As they were the only ones in there, they spouted shit talk about other people in the class, and I think one of the guys, who was a girl who claimed she was Jewish, said something anti-Semitistic. The school found out and they had their Chromebooks confiscated. Another drama was that a guy, just a quite nice fella, was bullied by his buddies just because he didn't want to play the game. They were like, what? And all his friends began bullying him just because they were afraid of, I guess, their leader. Just absolutely awful. How petty do you have to bully a guy and intimidate your friends because they didn't want to play Fortnite? Finally, one of the little guys, short guy, had some beef with one of the troublemaker kids, and so he wanted to fight him in the schoolyard, but the troublemaker took his friends to the fight. And they beat him up. He got really angry and it was a large drama.